Welcome back, everyone. Before we dive in, make sure you drop your thoughts and the lessons you took from this story in the comments. And don't forget to like and subscribe. Let's get into it. My name is Quentin Hayes. I'm 37 years old, and until the year my marriage came apart, I thought I understood the difference between a difficult season and a dangerous one. I had been with my wife, Latoya, for 15 years and married to her for 12. We lived in Plano, Texas, in a house we had spent years turning into something that felt permanent. I worked as a landscape architect in Dallas. I designed courtyards, public gardens, commercial green spaces, and the occasional private property for people who wanted nature arranged as carefully as their furniture. Latoya was a senior marketing executive at a regional consulting firm that had recently entered negotiations with Mercer Capital Group, a much larger company led by Donovan Mercer. Before any of that happened, Latoya and I had been the kind of couple people described as steady. We were not perfect, but we had history. When I was 25 and trying to start my own design practice with more ambition than money, she worked her regular job and took weekend event assignments so we could pay rent while I chased contracts. When my father died unexpectedly 4 years into our marriage, she sat beside me through every funeral arrangement and every quiet night afterward when I could not sleep. I had supported her the same way. I paid most of our expenses while she completed an executive certification program. I cooked dinner on the nights she studied until midnight. I drove her to an interview in a thunderstorm because her car would not start, then waited 3 hours in a coffee shop until she came out smiling because she had gotten the job. I trusted her because trust between us had never felt like a gamble. It felt earned. The first change was not dramatic enough to frighten me. It was simply unfamiliar. Latoya began coming home later. Her phone stayed face down on the kitchen counter. She started taking calls in the garage or on the back patio. When I asked about work, her answers became shorter even as her hours became longer. "The Mercer acquisition is consuming everybody," she told me one Thursday night while removing her earrings in front of our bedroom mirror. "There are meetings about meetings now." I believed her. Donovan Mercer had become important to her firm. His company was negotiating a major investment and possible merger, and Latoya had been assigned to several teams preparing the transition. She told me Donovan appreciated her ideas. At first, I was proud. "Then make sure he remembers whose strategy impressed him," I said. "You earned your seat in that room." She smiled and kissed my cheek. That memory would later bother me because I had encouraged her to step confidently into the very rooms where she began lying to me. Over the following months, the excuses multiplied. A client dinner became an overnight planning session. A Saturday meeting appeared without warning. A training conference in Fort Worth supposedly required her to stay until Sunday afternoon. Sometimes she came home smelling of perfume stronger than the fragrance she normally wore and carrying the faint scent of champagne. I noticed. I simply did not interpret every change as betrayal because I had spent 15 years believing the woman beside me would tell me if something between us was dying. There had been strain in our marriage. I will not rewrite our history to make myself flawless. My firm had recently won a difficult municipal redevelopment project, and I had been spending too many evenings reviewing drainage plans, contractor revisions, and site reports. Latoya complained twice that I seemed mentally absent even when I was sitting beside her. She was right. One night she closed my laptop and said, "Quentin, I need my husband in the room, not just his body." I apologized. After that, I tried to make changes. I moved 2 client calls out of the evening. I planned Friday dinners. I suggested a weekend in Fredericksburg. She canceled the trip because of a Mercer strategy session. I never imagined that my distraction had become something she discussed with another man. I thought we were doing what married people did when work became overwhelming. Adjusting, complaining, apologizing, and trying again. What I did not know was that several months earlier, after an industry reception in downtown Dallas, Donovan had asked Latoya to have another drink with him after everyone else left. She said yes. 2 weeks later, they had dinner alone. A month after that, they kissed in his car. Nobody forced her into those first decisions. Nobody threatened her career before she crossed those lines. She wanted his attention, enjoyed the secrecy, and told herself she could control what she was doing. By the time pressure and manipulation entered the relationship, she had already spent months building the lie with him. My first serious suspicion came on a humid Tuesday evening. LaToya was getting dressed for a corporate reception connected to Mercer Capital. She wore a burgundy silk dress I had always loved on her and stood at the mirror fastening a pair of earrings I had given her for her 35th birthday. "You are sure spouses are not invited?" I asked. She paused for half a second. "Not tonight," she said. "It is mostly executives, attorneys, and acquisition people. You would be miserable." "I could survive boring people for a couple of hours," I replied. "Besides, I have barely seen you this week." She kept looking into the mirror instead of at me. "Please do not make this difficult, Quentin." The words landed strangely because I had not been arguing. "I am not making anything difficult," I said. I asked if I could come. She softened immediately, kissed my cheek, and told me she would be home before midnight. After she left, I sat in the living room with the television on and did not absorb a single minute of it. Our vehicles were connected through the same family account because we had activated location services years earlier for roadside assistance and emergencies. Around 9:30, I opened the shared vehicle application. Her car was not at the downtown hotel where she said the reception was being held. It was parked several blocks away near a private business club in the Arts District. I stared at the location for nearly 10 minutes before picking up my keys. I did not walk into that building believing I was about to catch my wife cheating. I told myself there might have been a venue change. I told myself executives sometimes moved gatherings without telling spouses. I told myself enough things to keep driving. When I reached the club, I parked across the street. The entrance was visible through 2 tall glass doors. I stayed in my vehicle because I suddenly felt ridiculous. Then a black sedan stopped at the curb. Donovan Mercer stepped out. I recognized him from business articles and photographs LaToya had shown me. He was 52, polished, wealthy, and confident in the way powerful people often become when rooms consistently rearrange themselves around them. A minute later, I saw LaToya through the glass. She came from the elevator lobby wearing the burgundy dress. Donovan smiled when he saw her. She smiled back, not the polite smile she used with clients. Something private passed between them before he placed his hand at the small of her back and guided her toward a private dining corridor. She did not move away. I could not hear them. I did not need to. I sat there gripping the steering wheel and felt my understanding of my marriage split open. I still did not know how long it had been happening or how far it had gone. But I knew enough to stop telling myself I was imagining things. I drove home before she could see me. When LaToya came in shortly after midnight, I was in bed pretending to sleep. She moved carefully through the dark room, changed clothes, and slid beneath the covers beside me. "You awake?" she whispered. I kept my breathing slow. She touched my shoulder once, then rolled away. That was the longest night of my life up to that point. Anger came first, then disbelief, then a desperate hope that I had misunderstood what I saw. By morning, I knew I could not confront her with one scene observed through glass. I needed enough truth to decide what came next. For several days, I behaved normally. I did not buy recording equipment. I did not follow her everywhere. I did not try to break into accounts that did not belong to me. I simply started paying attention. The joint credit card statement showed restaurant charges on nights LaToya had supposedly eaten at the office. Our shared checking account showed 2 unusually large transfers to the credit card during the previous 4 months. There were parking charges near 2 downtown hotels and 1 weekend charge from a hotel in Fort Worth on the weekend she had called a professional retreat. Those records did not prove everything, but they gave shape to the lie. Then Friday night gave me what I had been afraid to find. LaToya fell asleep with her phone on the nightstand. We had always known each other's passcodes. Hers had been our wedding anniversary for years. I stood beside the bed for almost a full minute before touching it. Part of me felt ashamed. Another part remembered Donovan's hand on her back. I unlocked the screen. The main text application held nothing suspicious, which almost made me stop. Then a notification appeared from a messaging application she rarely used. The contact was saved under the letter D. I opened it. My wife had not been having a brief affair. I was looking at months of it. There were discussions about hotel rooms, private dinners, late-night meetings that had never been meetings, and messages coordinating lies she would tell me. Donovan had written, "Tell him the merger team is keeping you late." LaToya had answered, "He has his city project. He will believe it." In another exchange, Donovan asked whether I had become suspicious. Her reply was the sentence that stayed with me longer than the photographs, hotel references, or sexual messages. "He is so distracted lately. He will not even notice." I read it 3 times. The affair hurt. That sentence humiliated me. She had taken the trust one gave her and turned it into evidence that I was foolish. I kept scrolling, and that was when the betrayal became personal in a way I had not expected. 6 weeks earlier, LaToya had told me she had to attend a weekend strategy retreat in Fort Worth. I had packed snacks for her drive and kissed her goodbye in our kitchen. In the messages, I found the real plan. She and Donovan had stayed at a boutique hotel in Dallas instead. Worse, she had suggested the place because it was where she and I had celebrated our 10th wedding anniversary. "The suite has the best view," she had written to him. "I know because Quentin surprised me there once." Donovan replied that he liked the idea of replacing an old memory with a better one. LaToya responded with a laughing reaction. I had paid for our anniversary weekend there after saving for months during a difficult business year. I remembered champagne by the window, her head against my shoulder, and the promise we made that no matter how busy life became, we would keep choosing each other. She had carried another man into that memory and joked while doing it. The hotel charge had been paid using our joint rewards card. She later transferred marital money to cover part of the balance. I put the phone down because my hands were shaking too badly to keep holding it. I went downstairs, sat on the kitchen floor, and cried quietly while my wife slept upstairs. By sunrise, I was furious enough to imagine doing things I would have regretted. I wanted to wake her and demand answers. I wanted to drive to Donovan's house. I wanted to send every screenshot to everybody who knew them. Instead, I made coffee and sat at the kitchen table until the anger stopped deciding for me. The next morning, while LaToya was at work, I called a divorce attorney named Bernice Shaw. I told her only that I believed my wife was having an affair and that shared money might have been used. She scheduled me for that afternoon. Bernice listened without reacting dramatically. When I finished, she said, "Your first goal is not revenge. Your first goal is to understand your financial and legal position before emotion makes decisions for you." She told me to preserve records I already had lawful access to, document account balances, copy recent statements, inventory major marital assets, and avoid draining accounts or hiding money. She also warned me against covert recordings, impersonating LaToya, breaking passwords I did not know, or distributing intimate material. "You are hurt," she said, "but do not turn yourself into the person defending bad conduct later." I needed that sentence. I left her office with a checklist instead of a revenge fantasy. Over the next week, I documented what I could legally see. I downloaded statements from our joint accounts. I saved the messages I had already discovered because the phone was accessible. Through the passcode LaToya had voluntarily shared with me for years, but I did not keep returning to it every night. I photographed receipts that were sitting in a shared household drawer. One restaurant charge lined up with a night she had told me a client call ran late. A hotel parking charge matched a message about meeting Donovan. The most important discovery involved money. Nearly $6,000 in shared funds had indirectly covered card balances that included hotel rooms, dinners, transportation, and gifts connected to the affair. It was not enough to bankrupt us, but the amount mattered less than what it represented. Bernice advised me to keep everything organized and let the financial records be addressed properly during divorce proceedings. I also began reading public information about Mercer Capital. Donovan was not merely an outside acquaintance. He was executive chairman of the company negotiating the acquisition and had substantial influence over which leaders from LaToya's firm would receive senior roles after the deal. That meant their undisclosed relationship could affect personnel decisions, compensation recommendations, and merger disclosures. It also explained why his name appeared in messages discussing a possible promotion for her. The messages showed 2 ugly truths at once. LaToya had willingly begun the affair, and Donovan had later started using his professional influence to keep her in it. Early messages were flirtatious and mutual. She told him she liked the danger. She arranged meetings herself. She lied to me without being instructed. Months later, the tone changed. LaToya wrote, "We need to stop before this destroys everything." Donovan answered, "You should think carefully about timing. The leadership recommendations are not final." In another message, after she refused a hotel invitation, he reminded her that he had personally supported her for a post-acquisition strategy role. There was also discussion of a corporate apartment used for some of their meetings and company-paid dinners that had been labeled as acquisition expenses. I did not reinterpret the affair as something she had never chosen. She had chosen it. But the later pressure was real, and it created a separate problem beyond adultery. I showed the messages to Bernice. She told me the employment issues were not mine to prosecute. "You can provide legitimate evidence to appropriate people," she said. "Do not exaggerate. Do not make conclusions you cannot prove. Let the company investigate its own executives." That became the difference between what I wanted to do in anger and what I actually did. 3 days later, with Bernice's guidance, I prepared a concise evidence package. It contained screenshots showing the undisclosed relationship, references to promotion influence, corporate resources, and the messages that appeared to connect professional benefits with LaToya's continued cooperation. I included dates and corresponding joint financial records where they were relevant. I did not include intimate photographs. I did not send anything to friends, relatives, clients, or social media. I sent the workplace portion to publicly listed contacts from Mercer Capital's General Counsel and Board Audit Committee and to the compliance office at LaToya's firm. My message did not accuse Donovan of crimes or label LaToya a victim. I wrote that I was the spouse of an employee involved in an undisclosed relationship with a senior executive connected to an active acquisition, and that the attached material appeared to raise conflict of interest and corporate resource concerns. Then I stopped. For 2 days, nothing happened. On the 3rd, Bernice received a request from outside counsel asking whether I would preserve the original evidence. That told me somebody had taken it seriously. At home, LaToya continued pretending. She kissed me goodbye. She asked about my projects. Once she stood in the kitchen describing a presentation while the same phone that contained months of lies rested beside her hand. I finally understood how deception survives. It is not always brilliant. Sometimes it survives because the person being deceived still wants normal life to be real. The 10th anniversary banquet for LaToya's firm was scheduled for the following Saturday at a downtown Dallas hotel. It was the company's biggest event of the year, and Donovan was supposed to deliver a speech about the merger and future leadership. Before I discovered the affair, LaToya had barely discussed whether I would attend. Now I decided I would. "I think I will come with you Saturday," I said over breakfast. Her fork stopped halfway to her mouth. "You hate those events." "I do not hate them," I replied. "I usually skip them because one of us has to enjoy life." Normally she would have laughed. She did not. "There will be a lot happening," she said. "I will be moving between tables and speaking with clients." "That is fine. I want to celebrate what you have accomplished." Her eyes searched my face. I wondered whether she sensed something. The investigation had already begun behind the scenes. I knew because outside counsel contacted Bernice again with follow-up questions about dates, expenses, and the source of particular messages. I answered only what I could support. I did not know whether the board would act before the banquet. I did not need them to. My plan was no longer to destroy 2 people in one spectacular moment. My plan was to protect myself, let documented misconduct reach the people responsible for investigating it, and confront my wife when I was ready. The days before the banquet were harder than the investigation. Evidence gave me something practical to do, but memories kept interfering. LaToya had been 22 when we met at a friend's birthday dinner in Arlington. She laughed at a joke nobody else found funny, and I spent the rest of the night trying to make her laugh again. When I lost my first major client and thought my business was finished, she brought takeout to my tiny office and helped me sort unpaid invoices until 2 in the morning. When she was terrified before her first executive presentation, I listened to the same speech 6 times in our living room and applauded after every version. We had argued about money, family, work hours, and whether our kitchen needed remodeling, but I had never doubted that we were on the same side. Now I could sit across from her and remember both versions of her at once. The wife who held my hand at my father's funeral, and the woman who told another man I would never notice her betrayal. That contradiction was more painful than anger. I did not want to erase 15 years because of several terrible months. I also knew 15 good years could not erase what she had deliberately done. On Saturday night, we drove downtown in silence, broken only by ordinary questions. LaToya wore a silver gown and looked beautiful enough to make the entire situation feel unreal. I wore a black tuxedo I had not used since a charity dinner the previous year. When we entered the ballroom, Donovan was already greeting executives near the stage. He saw LaToya first. Something passed across his face before he noticed me standing beside her. Then his expression became professionally warm. "Quentin," he said, extending his hand. "I have heard a great deal about your work." I shook it. I hope it was accurate. His smile tightened slightly. "LaToya says you have been consumed by a city project." I looked at my wife. Her face lost color. "Work has kept me busy," I said, "but I have been paying closer attention lately." Donovan studied me for a moment, then nodded and excused himself. I did not threaten him. I did not deliver some dramatic speech about foundations or gardens. I simply watched a man who had assumed I was irrelevant realize that I might not be. LaToya waited until he moved away before whispering, "What did you mean by that?" "We can talk later," I replied. "Tonight is important for your company." Halfway through dinner, the atmosphere shifted. It was subtle at first. Donovan's general counsel entered through a side door and spoke to two board members. One of them left his table immediately. A senior executive from LaToya's firm received a message, read it twice, and stood up. Then LaToya's phone began vibrating beside her plate. She looked at the screen and went still. "I need to take this," she whispered. "Go ahead," I said. She walked toward the hallway. Donovan followed several minutes later, but before he reached the doors, an older board member intercepted him. Their conversation remained quiet, but Donovan's posture changed. His shoulders stiffened. The board member said something and pointed toward a private conference room. Donovan glanced across the ballroom at LaToya's empty chair and then at me. For the first time since I'd seen him, his confidence disappeared. I did not smile. I felt no satisfaction strong enough to cancel what the night meant. 10 minutes later, LaToya returned. Her breathing was shallow. "Quentin," she said, "we need to talk somewhere private." "Now?" I asked. "Please." I stood and followed her to a quiet corridor near the ballroom. The moment we were alone, she turned toward me. "You know, it was not a question." "Yes," I said. She closed her eyes. "How long?" "Long enough." "Did you send something to the company?" I provided evidence of an undisclosed relationship and the professional issues attached to it. Her eyes filled with tears. "You went to them before you came to me. I went to an attorney before I came to you." That frightened her more than anything else I'd said. "An attorney?" she whispered. "A divorce attorney." She covered her mouth. For several seconds, she could not speak. Then she said, "Quentin, please listen to me before you decide everything." I almost laughed at the word decide. "You decided quite a lot without me." She flinched. "I know. How many months?" "Almost 7. The answer was worse than I expected. 7 months of hotel rooms? 7 months of telling me you were working late? Yes. 7 months of looking me in the face? Yes. My voice remained low because I did not want the ballroom hearing us. "And when you wrote that I was too distracted to notice, was that funny to you?" She broke then. Her shoulders dropped and tears rolled down her face. "No," she said. "Not now." I asked what it was then. She looked at the floor. "Cruel. Arrogant." Something I said because I wanted to feel in control of what I was doing. "You used our anniversary hotel," I said. Her head snapped up. "Quentin, you took him into the place where we celebrated 10 years of marriage. You told him I had surprised you there. You let him joke about replacing the memory." She pressed one hand against the wall. "I cannot defend that. You paid part of it with our money." "I know. Did you ever think about me while you were there?" She cried harder, but answered, "Yes." "And you stayed?" "Yes." That answer mattered because I needed the truth without performance. She took several breaths before continuing. I started it willingly, she said. I need you to know I'm not going to lie about that. Donovan did not force me to have dinner with him. He did not force the first kiss. He did not force me to lie to you. I like the attention. I like feeling important to somebody that powerful, and I told myself I could keep it separate from my marriage. I stared at her. You cannot keep betrayal separate from the person you are betraying. I know that now. You knew enough then to hide it. She nodded slowly. Yes. Then she told me what had changed. 2 months earlier, she had tried to end the affair after Donovan began talking openly about what her role could become after the acquisition. At first, his promises had excited her. Later, they frightened her because she realized her career and their relationship had become tangled together. When she tried to pull away, he reminded her that leadership recommendations were still being discussed. When she refused meetings, he became colder at work. When she told him she wanted no more hotel visits, he mentioned the corporate apartment, confidential strategy discussions, and how badly the truth could affect her reputation if it came out without his protection. He became controlling, she said, but I gave him the leverage. I handed it to him every time I lied to you and every time I went back. I believed that distinction because the messages supported it. I did not absolve her. You were trapped later, I said, but you walked into the room willingly. Yes. She wiped her face. That is what I've been terrified to admit, even to myself. Before I could respond, the ballroom doors opened and one of her company's human resources executives approached. Latoya, she said quietly, outside counsel needs you in conference room B. Latoya looked at me as though the floor had disappeared beneath her. Go, I said. I returned to the ballroom alone. Donovan never gave his speech. The company president stepped onto the stage several minutes later and told the audience there had been a change in the program due to an internal governance matter. He did not announce an affair. He did not name Latoya. He said the merger presentation would be postponed and that the evening would continue with employee recognition. That was enough. People noticed Donovan was missing. They noticed Latoya was missing. They noticed attorneys moving through the hallway and board members speaking in tight groups. Phones came out. Rumors began before dessert. I sat at the table and realized a public spectacle did not require a hacked screen or a dramatic video. Truth inside a corporate room creates its own noise. About 40 minutes later, Donovan emerged from the conference area with 2 board members and his attorney. He looked furious. He saw me and started walking in my direction, but one of the board members placed a hand on his arm and stopped him. Their exchange became tense. Donovan pointed once toward me. The board member shook his head and guided him toward a private exit. Whatever power Donovan normally carried into a room had suddenly developed limits. Latoya came out next. Her makeup had been wiped away around her eyes, and she looked exhausted. She did not walk toward her colleagues. She came to me. They placed me on administrative leave pending the investigation, she said. I nodded. They asked whether I received favorable treatment from Donovan. They asked about the strategy position. They asked about the corporate apartment. Tell them the truth. I did. She swallowed. I told them I had a consensual affair with him before he began pressuring me. I told them about the promotion conversations. I told them which dinners were personal, even though they were submitted as business expenses. For the first time that night, I saw something other than panic in her expression. Shame, perhaps, but also the beginning of accountability. Good, I said. Quentin, can we go home? I looked around the ballroom. People were pretending not to watch us. I had imagined this moment differently during the first night of rage. I had imagined enjoying her humiliation. Instead, I felt tired. We're not going home together, I said. Her face crumpled. I'm going home. You should stay with your sister or get a hotel tonight. She nodded. I understand. Do you? I asked. I'm beginning to. I drove back to Plano alone. The house felt different the moment I entered it. Nothing had moved, but every room contained evidence of a life I could no longer trust in the same way. Our wedding photograph stood on a shelf in the living room. I picked it up and stared at the 2 people smiling back at me. I did not smash it. I placed it face down and went upstairs. Latoya texted once around midnight. I am at my sister's house. I will not come back until you tell me it is okay. I am sorry. I did not answer until morning. Then I wrote, I need space. Bernice will contact you when necessary. The following week became practical. I met with Bernice again. We reviewed the house, retirement accounts, business interests, debts, and joint funds. She advised me on temporary financial arrangements, so normal expenses could still be paid without either of us making impulsive transfers. I changed nothing secretly. Latoya hired her own attorney. Through them, we agreed that she would retrieve clothes and personal belongings while I was at work. When I came home afterward, half the closet was empty. That hurt more than the paperwork. For 15 years, her things had occupied space beside mine. Now there was a clean line where her shoes had been. The corporate consequences took longer than the rumors predicted. The merger did not disappear overnight because one executive had an affair. Instead, both companies opened investigations. Outside counsel reviewed expense records, conflict disclosures, promotion recommendations, the use of a corporate apartment, and communications between Donovan and Latoya. Mercer Capital's board discovered Donovan had failed to disclose the relationship while participating in decisions that affected people at Latoya's firm. Investigators also found several dinners and travel expenses described as acquisition business that were primarily personal. More serious were messages suggesting that Latoya's future role had become leverage after she tried to end the relationship. Donovan denied coercion and insisted she had pursued him willingly. The early messages supported part of his argument, but the later ones created a different problem. After 6 weeks, he was removed from the merger committee and placed on leave. 2 months later, he resigned as executive chairman under an agreement requiring repayment of disputed expenses. The merger itself was delayed, renegotiated, and eventually continued under different leadership. His career did not vanish in one evening, but the image he had treated as untouchable was damaged by his own decisions. Latoya's consequences were different. The investigators concluded that she had violated company disclosure and conflict policies and had participated in improper expense reporting, though the review also documented Donovan's later pressure regarding her advancement. She was offered the opportunity to remain on leave until the process ended, but she resigned before returning to the office. The promotion she had once imagined was gone. Several colleagues who had trusted her felt deceived. She did not lose every friend or become unemployable, but the professional identity she had spent years building was badly damaged. For a while, she stayed with her sister and attended individual therapy. We spoke only about the divorce and the house. Then, 3 months after the banquet, she asked whether I would meet her somewhere neutral. Bernice said there was no legal reason I could not. We met at a quiet coffee shop in Richardson. Latoya looked different, not because she had abandoned expensive clothes or stopped wearing perfume, but because she no longer carried herself like somebody trying to stay ahead of a secret. I have spent months trying to explain myself, she said. Therapy made me realize that explanations can become another way of avoiding responsibility. I waited. So I am not here to explain. I am here to tell you I destroyed something I had no right to destroy. She told me she had spent years tying too much of her worth to achievement. Each promotion had given her a temporary sense of being important, and Donovan's attention intensified that feeling because he controlled rooms she wanted access to. When he chose me, she said, I confuse being desired by someone powerful with becoming powerful myself. She looked directly at me. That was my failure, not yours. You were busy. We had problems. I could have told you I was lonely. I could have demanded counseling. I could have left you if I believed the marriage was finished. I did none of those things. I cheated because I wanted something selfish and believed I could keep you while taking it. I appreciated the honesty, but honesty after discovery did not repair the months before it. Why mock me? I asked. She closed her eyes briefly. Because every time I admitted you might notice, I had to admit what I was doing to you. Calling you distracted made me feel smarter than the situation. It let me pretend I was controlling it. You made my trust sound like stupidity. I know, that sentence did more damage than you understand. I think I understand more every day, she replied. And I know understanding it does not entitle me to another chance. I did not hate her during that conversation. That surprised me. I had spent weeks believing hatred would be permanent. Instead, I saw a woman I had loved for most of my adult life who had made choices that ended our marriage. Both things could exist together. I forgive parts of this already, I told her. Tears appeared in her eyes. What does that mean? It means I do not wake up wanting you ruined anymore. I do not want Donovan ruined either. Whatever happens to either of you should come from your own choices, not from me spending the rest of my life trying to punish you. She nodded. But forgiveness is not the same thing as rebuilding this marriage. Her hands tightened around the coffee cup. Do you know that for certain? Yes. The word hurt to say, but it was true. When you were late before, I thought you were working. If we stayed married, every future late night would become a question. Every phone turned face down would become a question. Every conference, every hotel, every difficult season at work would drag me back into those messages. I do not want to become your guard. I do not want you to live as my suspect. That is not a marriage I want for either of us. She cried quietly and said, What if I spend years becoming someone you could trust again? I looked at her for a long time before answering. Then become that person for yourself. Do not make your growth another argument for why I owe you the marriage back. She lowered her head. That is fair. I love you deeply, I said. Part of me probably always will. But loving someone once does not require trusting them again. She wiped her eyes. I keep thinking about our 10th anniversary. About that hotel. I said nothing. I took something beautiful and contaminated it because I wanted to prove to myself that my old life did not own me. Now I understand how cruel that was. You cannot give that memory back to me. I know, and I cannot spend the rest of my life asking whether the next good memory will become something you use with someone else. She nodded. Then she said the one thing I needed to hear from her more than any plea for forgiveness. You do not owe me another chance simply because I finally understand what I threw away. Our divorce was finalized several months later. It was not friendly in the sentimental sense, but it was controlled. There were disagreements about money in the house, and both attorneys had to work through the shared funds used during the affair. LaToya agreed that those documented expenses should be considered during the financial settlement. Neither of us tried to hide assets. Neither of us dragged friends or relatives into choosing sides. We sold the Plano house because I could not imagine living there alone, and LaToya said she could not afford to buy out my share. On the morning before closing, I walked through the empty rooms one last time. The living room sounded larger without furniture. In the kitchen, I remembered cooking dinner while she studied for her certification. In the hallway, I remembered hearing her laugh when we first moved in because I had assembled a console table backward. In the bedroom, I remember the night I opened her phone. Good memories and terrible ones had become attached to the same walls. I finally understood that leaving the house did not mean declaring every year inside it worthless. Some parts of our marriage had been real and good. The ending was also real. I did not need one truth to erase the other. LaToya eventually found work with a smaller consulting organization that had no connection to Mercer Capital. It was not the prestigious executive path she had once expected, but from what she told me during one of our final legal conversations, she was grateful to be working again. She continued therapy. Donovan remained mostly out of public leadership after leaving Mercer Capital, though I occasionally saw his name connected to private investments. I stopped following what happened to him. That was one of the clearest signs that I was recovering. During the worst weeks, I had wanted updates because his suffering felt connected to justice. Later, I realized I did not want a man occupying free space in my life. I had already given him enough. Cedric Foster, an old college friend who ran a construction design company, asked me one afternoon whether I regretted not publicly humiliating Donovan at the banquet. You had enough material to bury him socially, he said. Maybe, I replied, but then I would have spent the rest of my life wondering whether I destroyed myself trying to destroy him. The legitimate investigation had done what it was supposed to do. I had protected my finances, preserved evidence, ended my marriage, and told the truth. Nothing more was required from me. Nearly a year after I first saw LaToya with Donovan through those glass doors, she asked to meet one last time. There were no legal issues left, no property to divide, no signatures waiting. We met at a park in Dallas on a cool Saturday morning. She told me she was doing better. I told her I was glad. Then she asked, "Do you ever think there might be a version of us again someday?" "Not now. Maybe years from now." I had known that question might eventually come. "No," I said gently. She looked away, but I continued before the silence became cruel. "That does not mean I think you are permanently defined by what you did. I hope you build a good life. I hope you become everything you are trying to become. But I need my future to belong to something that is not built around recovering from our past." She breathed out slowly. "I understand. I do not hate you. No, and I am not waiting for you to suffer." She looked back at me with tears in her eyes. "That almost hurts more. Maybe because punishment would keep us connected." She gave a sad smile. "You always did know how to simplify things." "Not always," I said. We hugged once before leaving. It was not romantic. It was goodbye. I moved into a smaller place closer to Dallas and put most of my energy into work. Several months later, my firm won a contract to redesign an abandoned industrial lot into a public garden and community gathering space. The property was ugly when I first walked it: compacted soil, broken concrete, rusted fencing, weeds forcing themselves through cracks. 10 years earlier, I might have looked at a site like that and immediately imagined the finished picture. This time I appreciated the slower part: removing what no longer belonged, testing what remained, deciding what could be saved, and building without pretending the old damage had never happened. One evening near the end of the first construction phase, I stood beside a newly planted row of young trees while the crew packed up for the day. Cedric called from across the site, asking whether I was coming with everyone for dinner. In a minute, I called back. I stayed there alone a little longer. For the first time since my marriage ended, silence did not feel suspicious. I did not wonder where LaToya was, whether Donovan regretted anything, or whether I had one. I looked at the new paths taking shape across ground that had once seemed useless and realized I no longer needed their downfall to prove I had survived. Then I locked the gate behind me and walked toward the life that was still mine. If you enjoyed this story, please like, comment, and share this video with your friends. Subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a powerful story drop.